Hello, Susanna. Well, as I promised, I said I was going to record a class. And I selected a topic that everybody takes a lot of confusion with, and I'm sure you are one of these people too, because you're human, right? That's all it takes to be confused about it, a non-native human speaker. And the topic is prepositions. Yeah, so this class is called Making Peace with Prepositions. And I give this title because it's a catchy title, of course. And I think it's, well, you tell me later if it was as useful as I think it's going to be. Yeah. Well, to start with, let's see. What have you been up to lately? Or what have you been up for lately? Which one? I haven't seen you for ages, or maybe in ages. Which one's correct? Both, neither. When was the last time we met? Was it at a delicious lunch you prepared for us, or at and to us, or in and for us, and then you get it? Yeah. So prepositions are often these tiny little words that nobody pays attention to. But yeah, everybody wants to learn how to say things in a more correctly and an accurate way. So that's what I thought it was going to be interesting. So in order for us to understand and to help you make peace with these little words, let's talk about what they do to understand why they're so difficult to master. Yeah. So they are words that establish a connection between other classes of words. Yeah. Another way to say it is that they add info about the object in several different ways. The object being, or maybe it could be sometimes inside the subject too. It's less common. Yeah. So object subject. So they add info. What kind of info? And that's the problem. That's where the problem starts. Well, they're often used to show direction. So after the pharmacy or below the desk. Yeah, they can be used to talk about time, place, locations, to talk about spatial relationships in general. Sometimes to introduce an object. But this is more or less extensive, but still very incomplete list of possibilities of how they can connect different classes of words, right? So let's think of them simply as connecting words. Okay. There's a little problem with this because we have another set of words called conjunctions, but they do the same thing. But in order to separate them, I think it's probably easier to see prepositions as words that connect other words. For example, a basket of fruit. So the preposition of is connecting these two words, right? Meanwhile, conjunctions, they connect ideas. Yeah. So I was talking about prepositions connecting words. Yeah. Meanwhile, conjunctions connect ideas. So meanwhile is a conjunction. So what is it doing here? Here I have an idea. I'm talking about what prepositions do. And here I have another idea. I'm talking about what conjunctions do. And this word, meanwhile, is connecting both ideas. Yeah. So we can think of prepositions as more restrict connections, and conjunctions as wider, as a wide connection in general. All right. Anyway, most prepositions, they are single words, like beneath, underneath, above, below. But many, they are multi-word. Here I put some examples. There are many others. And if you pay attention, some of them seem to be single word. But actually, you can think of them like that: through and out, up and on, in and to. Yeah. So the origin of these words and some others, it's in the putting simply two prepositions together. Okay. Anyway, so they connect words, yeah, and they're usually single words, but can be multi-word. Well, why is it so difficult to master them? That should be your second question. Well, as we saw, because they have many uses. That's enough of a problem if you think about it. Also, so notwithstanding that, there are very few useful rules governing how they are used. There are some, we're going to see in a few moments, but there are very few, and I mean very few useful rules, because rules there are many. And there are so many, in fact, that you already know what happens. Our brain cannot process that, so it's basically useless to try to memorize all of those rules. Yeah. So these very few probably are worth trying to memorize, but not every other. Okay. Also because there are lots of exceptions. Yeah. And because of these reasons, there isn't much of a logic governing the use of prepositions. Well, so we have a lot of problems. So how can a person make peace with them then? Well, it has to do with understanding why they are where they are. And that, as maybe you can guess by now, requires asking questions to the text. For example, what is this preposition doing here? Why is it there? In other words, which word or which sets of words make the preposition be there? So what is it connecting? So each one of these words around it, maybe not adjacent to them, because you know the order of words are sometimes confusing in English, but I'm sure there will be at least one word there, sometimes a set of words commanding, but that preposition should be there. Okay, and of course this has to do with terms of words, as you probably already know. Okay, so let's go to them. The easiest way to understand prepositions, in my opinion, and to understand what they're doing, where they are, is to understand whether they're prepositions of time, or prepositions of place, or if they are governed by an adjective that has to be followed by a preposition, or if they're governed by a verb that has to be followed by a preposition. By the way, we call these prepositional verbs. Another name for that is intransitive indirect verbs, just like we have them in Portuguese. Right? So these are verbs that need an object. Oh, sorry, transitive. So they need an object. That's what transitive means. And this object has to be connected to the verb by preposition. Right? So this would be the case too. And finally, we have prepositional phrases. Yeah. Maybe you remember that when we talk about chunks of words, we're talking about many different things. So it's an umbrella term, right? So what happens is, when we talk about types of words, we could be speaking about idioms, about fixed expressions, about phrasal verbs, about collocations, and we could be talking about the phrases. And if you remember well, the most difficult ones to master are the phrases, because they're highly variable, some of them. Yeah. And it's the same thing here. These are the most difficult ones to remember and to understand. Let's see why. So let's start with prepositions of time. I put some here. So please have a look while I drink some water. And as you can see, what happens is, depending on what type of time word we're using, we use a different preposition. So when we're talking about centuries, we use in. The same goes for years, for months, for weeks. But when we arrive on days, for example, two different forms to talk about days, we use on. The weekend, the same. And then when we're talking about very specific times, we use at. Yeah. So you can think of it as a triangle. Let's draw a beautiful triangle here. Yeah. And you can think that the base of the triangle, so it's an inverted triangle, we use in. So from weeks to centuries, we use in. So we can speak about weeks, months, years, decades, yeah, centuries, millennia, without this double L or double N or both. Yeah. So we use in. And then when it's a little bit less inclusive, we use on. So that's for days and weekend, right? And then when it's the least inclusive of all, we use at. At is just for hours in very specific times. For example, lunchtime or dinner. Yeah. So we have the most inclusive in, intermediate on, and then at for very specific things. Yeah. And why do I say this is a useful rule? One of the very few when it comes to prepositions, because it works very, very well for time prepositions, and it also works very well for place prepositions. So when we're talking about these three, on, in, and at, the rules are basically the same, right? So let's put that here. So the more inclusive the place, we use in. So when we're talking about the universe, when we're talking about continents, or countries, or states, or cities, or neighborhoods, we use in. And then when it's a little bit less inclusive, for example, streets, avenues, we use on. And then when we're talking about very specific locations, for example, an address, we use at. So 121B Baker Street. If you don't know what this address means, go Google it. Or maybe we want to meet for dinner, and then I can tell them to meet me at the restaurant. So that's the specific place we're going to meet. Yeah. So again, more inclusive in, intermediate on, and the least inclusive at. Right. So I'm pretty sure this is the only useful rule to be applied in terms of prepositions of time and place. Yeah. But still, it has exceptions. Yeah. Unfortunately, what happens is planets is on. We have an example here on Mars, on Earth, on Jupiter, and so on. So planets should be in, right? But it's not. Also, we may have the following situation in the hospital or at the hospital. Which one do you think is correct? Given my example of the restaurant, probably you understood that it should be at a hospital, right? But the answer is it depends. Are you, for example, a doctor, or maybe are you visiting someone? Then you are at the hospital. But if you're sick, then you have to stay there. Maybe, I don't know, you're undergoing surgery, you're in the hospital. So there are several exceptions and situations and things that you might consider when using these kinds of prepositions. Yeah. So the rule is worth memorizing, but then again, pay attention to the exceptions because there are many. All right. So let's move on. Now here's some other prepositions of place, as we said, in the universe, but on a planet. And then from continents to squares and neighborhoods, we use in, and then on for streets and avenues, and then at for specific addresses, right? And then of course I have many other prepositions of place. Yeah, I just put some here. And some of them are difficult to master as well. It's not just on, in, and at. They are tricky little words that we should always pay attention to and try to really understand how they're used. Okay. Well, now we have adjectives plus prepositions. This is a little bit less complicated, in my opinion, because there are not so many exceptions, and in fact, they're not ruled at all. So all you have to do is to pay attention to the chunk. That's the way to go, because as you can see, this is a chunk. Yeah. So we worry, we get worried about things, and we think about of things. We can be famous for something, and so on. As you can see, for some of these words, so some adjectives, they require a certain preposition. For example, famous for. There's no other way to say that. Others, they can be followed by 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 prepositions, depending on what you want to say, depending on some kind of nuance. Right? So this is something to pay attention to. And it's never too much to remind you that it's not because you saw somewhere the chunk think about that you can automatically assume that, oh, I thought it was think of. So you cannot assume it is wrong. You can only know that this one is correct by seeing the chunk. All right? So that's a mistake you should avoid. And now the verbs and prepositions, they have very much the same logic, or the absence of logic of adjective prepositions, because it's really case by case. Yeah, so there are no rules to to be remembered here is only the chunks again. Yeah. So again, we focus on things. We look forward to meeting somebody else. Yeah, and so on. And then finally, we have prepositional phrases. I told you at the beginning that this one is the most difficult to master. But I mean, most people, and you're not most people, young lady, as my mother would say, right? What happens is once you adapt your brain, or you program your brain to find and identify chunks, then it's done. Yeah. So for these three, actually, the logic is the same. I say that people usually have more trouble with these because oftentimes they include other words like this. Yeah. And that can be quite confusing because there are too many little words, you see. And we don't really like to pay attention to little words because they're just there, you know. we seek most of the time meaning. That's what our brains are hungry for. Yeah. That's why we often don't really care that much about these little words. But they are very important if you want to be precise, if you want to have an accurate grammar. Yeah. So all it takes is to pay attention whenever you see a prepositional phrase like this to the whole chunk. Yeah. So instead of just saying, that beginning, and then you go to the dictionary to check the meaning of the word beginning, and then you forget about it, and then you memorize the word beginning, and then you forget what comes after it. So that's not going to work for your accuracy. Yeah. So you should really pay attention to the whole chunk. Okay. And then, of course, I propose an exercise, and of course, I'm not going to propose exercises of fill the gaps and to teach you this or that prepositional phrase or this or that verb plus preposition, because the way to really understand and master these things is by reading, is by listening and learning what you should pay attention to. Yeah, that's the key. But we even write it here. Learn what to pay attention to. Because if nobody teaches us that, we don't know. Yeah, it's not obvious. So this is the key word. What should you pay attention to? Yeah. So let's try to find the prepositions. Sometimes if you don't know what a word is, you don't know if it's a preposition or not. Yeah. Then of course you can go to the dictionary and check, because every dictionary is going to tell you what the word is. It's either going to be written there preposition like on your face or prep like that. Yeah, every dictionary tells you that. And if you don't want to choose a dictionary, you can try to think, is this unknown word connecting to others? So if you can try to do this exercise and realize it is, then it's a preposition. So this is the exercise that I propose. It's a little text that I adapted from this website here, right? It's about the lunar eclipse that we had a few days ago. And what I'd like you to do is to read the text, try to understand everything first, and then read it again, searching for prepositions. Remember, we have prepositions that are just one word and multi-word prepositions. So pause it to read, and when you're ready, try to find the prepositions, and then we're going to be back for some feedback, all right? So pause it now. Okay, so now that you've done the exercise, let's check if you did everything correct. So these in bold are the prepositions. Yeah, try to see if you find them, if you found them all. Maybe you thought some other word would be a preposition too, but it's not. So please take some time to check. And let's try to discuss. So now it's time to pause again, so you can try to understand why the preposition is there. What is it doing there? Which are the words governing the existence of that preposition there? Or what is it connecting? You see, these are all the same question, right? So ask this question to each one of these prepositions, and then let's return. Well, so let's discuss. So here I have a preposition across, and what's happening is the moon made its way across the night sky. So it is connecting the moon with the sky. Yeah, and we have the meaning of the position across. It's going from one end to the other. So the path that the moon makes throughout the sky or across the sky is like this. Yeah, it's from one end to the other. Okay, and then we have preposition into. Yeah, so it is connecting Sunday night into Monday morning. Yeah, as I said before, preposition into is a composite word, and it comes from the connection between preposition in and preposition to. Yeah, preposition to often relates to movement. Yeah, for example, I'm going to the market. And in this case here, it has to do with movement, but in terms of time. Yeah, so into one time into the other. Okay, and then we have position around. In this case, it means more or less. Yeah, so more or less this time. It's a time preposition. Right? And then we have into again. So what is passing into Earth's shadow? It's the moon again. Yeah, so this one is connecting the moon to the Earth's shadow. Yeah? Pay attention, here is not the Earth, so it should be on, right? But it's into Earth's shadow. Yeah, so that's the common word here. And then we have within roughly 2 hours. So it's a time preposition again, because this is the set of words commanding this preposition. And then here we have the preposition for. So it stayed there for some 85 minutes. So when we use verb to stay, actually, let me rephrase it. When we connect verb to stay with a kind of time, because we can use this verb in many different ways. So when we want to make this connection, we use preposition for, right? for how long are you staying on vacation? Oh, for 30 days. Yeah, to this for. And then we have the preposition instead of. Yeah, so remember, 2 words or more sometimes. And what is happening here? Instead of going dark, the moon turned red. So as you can see, it's a preposition that makes a type of connection that has to do with a contrast. So it was supposed to go dark, as it normally does, yeah. But instead of that, it turned red. So it is connecting these colors, yeah, contrasting them. The next is onto. So the origin of this one is just like into, except it's preposition on, of course. And then what happens is the sunlight was shining directly onto Earth. So it is connecting the Earth to the sunlight. And then we have through. Through is very similar to across, yeah. What is passing through what? So the atmosphere, yeah. The sunlight again was passing through the atmosphere. It's connecting these 2 words. And then we have onto again. The sunlight again projected onto the moon. So it is connecting these 2 words, right? As you can see, and as I mentioned previously, not necessarily, maybe even probably in most cases, what governs the use of preposition is not going to be like connected immediately, like I just said, to the preposition itself, right? And giving it a red tone during the eclipse. So that's the last one. And we're talking about the eclipse, yeah, and about the fact that the moon turned red. Okay, so the red tone. So that's basically it. We have several prepositions. The only prepositional phrase that we have here is this one, arguably. And then we have time prepositions. Then we have, yeah, kind of a place preposition, and then some others related more with connections. Yeah, a time preposition again, and then connections. Okay, so I know it's difficult, and the purpose of this exercise is not to give you a feeling like, wow, now I know how to use all of these and I'm going to be using them like with no mistakes. That's not the point. You are going to continue making lots of mistakes. Yeah. The point is, this class is about making peace with them. And how do we do that? By paying attention and by understanding why they are what they are, what they're doing there. Yeah. What is the type of connection it is establishing between what other classes of words? So which words are commanding their use? Yeah. And then once you understand that, you can understand if they are prepositions of time, of place, if they are there because of an adjective, or because of a verb, or because it's a prepositional phrase. Yeah. And then you can analyze it, and then based on that analysis, you can understand what is a chunk better, I guess. Yeah. So across the night sky, for example, that's a chunk. Yeah. Or maybe some period of the night into another period in the morning, another one. So it's just a matter of knowing what you should pay attention to. Okay. So I hope this class was useful, and I highly recommend that you practice this lots and lots and lots more. Yeah, until, well, you can understand things better. That's how it works. Practice. Yeah. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.